Hello, I'm Michał Matlak and you're watching TVP World Talks, where every word matters. The Hungarian presidency is off to a difficult start following Viktor Orban's adventurous approach to foreign policy, which involved visiting Kiev and then Moscow and then Beijing without consulting the matter with the European Union. The European Union itself decided to strike back by announcing that a major meeting of foreign policy chiefs of the bloc is going to take place in Brussels instead of Budapest. But what sort of impact is it going to have on the presidency, and what could be Hungary's next step? We're going to discuss this with our guest today, Michał Matlak, policy advisor at the European Parliament. Hello and welcome to TVP World.
Good morning.
So, Josep Borrell, the head of foreign policy of the European Union, insists that this is not a boycott. So, what is it exactly, and how much of an impact is it likely to have? Do you think that it is going to persuade Viktor Orban to change his mind, perhaps, to some extent, to rein him in, as it was?
No, obviously not. It's just I'd say a symbolic gesture showing that Orban's actions are not emanation of EU's foreign policy, and that what he did, especially in Moscow, was not an example of European foreign policy. I think that Borrell wanted to say that Orban failed to fulfill the article of the treaty saying about solidarity and support for the EU's foreign policy as an obligation of a member state, and that's a sign of the EU that the EU, the institutions, and the member states don't accept it. 25 members supported it, but one, Slovakia here on this issue is with Hungary.
So it's really interesting what Josep Borrell actually said, because he referred, as you stated, to the question of solidarity. But it also seems a bit vague, the statement that on the one hand, every single country has sovereignty when it comes to foreign policy, but on issues related to the European Union, they should act in a loyal and cooperative way. Do you think that Hungary may try to insinuate that, look, this is the part where sovereignty comes into play, and it does not really come into play with regards to the treaties? Or is it basically too much of a stretch? I mean, we do know that this is something that affects the European Union as a whole. I mean, they are holding the presidency. But will they try to look for this sort of loophole, as it was?
You're right that the article, and maybe the statement, maybe more the statement than the article, the statement of Josep Borrell is kind of showing the complexity of the foreign policy, of the EU's foreign policy and its relationship with state sovereignty. There is this tension, definitely, and Hungary was playing on that tension often. But in this case, I think it's simple, because Orban went to Ukraine but then to Moscow and Beijing in the first days of his presidency, as you said. So this changes everything, because he was pretending that he's representing the EU. Of course, he was also quite vague on that. He was mentioning that, but then he was saying that he's not representing the EU, knowing that he cannot do that formally because he had no mandate to do so. But in this case, I think that it's quite simple. He used the presidency to strengthen his international role, and there is no agreement to do that in Brussels. So I'd say that in general, you're right that there is a tension in the EU when it comes to foreign policy, because it's both a partial competence of the EU, but it's above all a competence of member states. But in this case, as we are talking about a country holding the presidency, it's different, because the country holding the presidency for half a year needs to behave as an honest broker, as we say here, so, and not as someone like concentrating solely on its interests. Especially that we are talking about not Hungary's interests, but Viktor Orban's interests, which differ as well.
Which brings me to my next question. Was it just a publicity stunt intended to boost Orban's morale, to boost his popularity at home? Since it is difficult to expect the Russian or the Chinese diplomats to be fooled by this. I mean, they probably would have known about the tensions within the European Union in advance, and they might have expected this to happen. So it's not like they thought, oh, it was really Viktor Orban representing the whole of the European Union. I mean, they knew, right? So who actually stands to benefit from this most, apart from Orban himself?
For sure, Moscow, because they want to show that the EU is not united in its support for Ukraine. So that's the for sure the capital that is most happy about what happened. But yes, it's true that they know that it's not a huge political gesture, doesn't change that much, and it's true that Orban is doing that for domestic reasons, because he faces a strong opponent for the first time in history of his government. Peter Magyar is a strong political leader. He comes from his camp, which makes things even more difficult. In the European elections, Orban won, but for the first time, another party got over 30% of votes, TISA, Peter Magyar's party. So we can see his fear that this younger, more dynamic and more centrist, even if pretty much on the right, leader can win the next parliamentary election in Hungary.
So Viktor Orban is in a bit of a pickle, isn't he? Because on the one hand, he alienated the European Union with his so-called peace plan, but on the other hand, there is the Lukoil issue. Now, Ukraine has decided that the transfer of Russian oil into Hungary and by extension to Slovakia has to go. Sanctions are now being imposed on the company. So Hungary all of a sudden comes up to the European Union authorities and says, look, can you do something about it? Is it sustainable? I mean, or is it a situation that shows that there are so many inconsistencies within the the policies pursued by Hungary that it is unsustainable in the long run? I mean, you cannot be against the European Union if you choose so, but on the other hand, rely on its mechanisms whenever it's convenient for you, right?
Yes, of course. This is inconsistent. In general, Orban's European policy is inconsistent because they are using the EU when they want it, but when the EU needs or the other member states need the support, they are very reluctant. So obviously, it's inconsistent. In this case, we can see that also Ukraine wants to join kind of the whole the political this situation by saying, look, if you are not helping us, we also have some leverage to force you to help us. We need to add one more fact, meaning that Orban is blocking the reimbursements for European countries supporting Ukraine with arms. So this is another aspect of the whole image, and I think that that's also the reason why Ukraine is for now blocking the energy supplies.
But that's also a very important point that you made, because some people just use this sort of mental shortcut and say Orban is blocking funds for Ukraine, but these funds are actually supposed to be returned to European countries which have already given weapons to Ukraine. So in a way, Ukraine is not affected directly by this because they have already received the weapons. So again, is it possible to say that this is made purely for internal European Union policy reasons, i.e. Orban wants to have leverage, saying, look, Ukraine is out of the picture because they already have their weapons, but you're not going to get your money back unless we agree to it?
Yes, in a way, yes, but on the other hand, it may affect the future arms deliveries because the countries now see that the reimbursement process is not working very well. So it might affect Ukraine in the end. But it's true that it's affecting, for now, it's affecting the other member states, and that's the biggest problem, that the majority of member states think that Orban and his government is not loyal, and that it's not a reliable partner, and hence the decision of Borrell. But here I would say that if we don't activate if the EU doesn't activate doesn't move forward with the Article 7, which could lead to the suspension of Hungary's voting rights in the Council of the European Union, nothing serious will happen. These are just like political symbolic gestures, important but with limited consequences.
So as you're saying, the situation can be difficult for Ukraine as well because it will provide a disincentive for the future. Countries knowing that they are not going to get their money back are going to be more reluctant to spend it on weapons for Ukraine. So you've mentioned Article 7. Is this the only way to rein in Orban's political adventurism? Because it is always a question of, can we go around the veto? Can we really try to persuade a country that is using its veto? What are the options generally really to protect this mechanisms of, this mechanism of providing Ukraine with arms, while at the same time maintaining the coherency of the European Union?
Yes, I think that the very danger of activating the Article 7 makes Orban accept in the end all the decision related to Ukraine, but at the same time he is trying to gain some time. He's trying to make these decisions kind of less strong, so he gets some impact, limited, but still. There is another way that is dangerous for Orban, meaning the conditionality mechanisms, meaning mechanisms that are blocking the funds for Hungary, and this is very painful for him. And I think that this will be continued. But the conditionality is mostly related to the rule of law issues, and especially the problems with how the money is spent. So it's impossible to link the funds, the blockage of the funds with the, for example, disloyalty in EU foreign policy. That's why it's a challenge definitely for the EU to react to these actions by Orban.
And finally, let's address the Lukoil situation. To what extent do you think Hungary itself should be to blame? Because a couple of years ago, even before the war, there were many countries in Central and Eastern Europe, including Poland, that have initiated major investments aimed at ensuring energy diversity. Now, Hungary apparently didn't do that. They stuck with contracts for nuclear power from Russia, from Rosatom. They were making new deals with Russia for other energy supplies. So now it is actually backfired. Are they only, are they the party to blame here? Because they're trying to blame Ukraine for blocking the deliveries. But should they have diversified, really, knowing that this could be a problem in the long run?
Yes, of course, definitely. A few European countries, including Germany, made this mistake, and obviously, from our perspective, at least from the perspective of the countries who were always very reluctant to accept kind of Russia's kind of imperialist policies. It's obviously a mistake. From Hungarian perspective, it's not a mistake because their a pro-Russian stance is much more accepted by the society. But definitely from the strategic point of view, they could have known that this might lead to a major problem, especially that they also faced Russian imperialism, for example, in 1956, and Orban was for years trying to revive this tradition, this anti-communist but also anti-Soviet and in a way anti-imperialist tradition. At the same time, he was proposing a policy that is quite that was quite pro-Russian, I'd say. So yes, we could say that from a strategic point of view, it was also Hungary's mistake.
So Hungary has essentially leapt onto the scene with its slogan, "Make Europe Great Again." Of course, critics might say, okay, so perhaps you should have started with your own energy sector instead. But that's, of course, is just a part of the broader discussion here concerning Hungary's approach to European policies. Michał Matlak was our guest today here on TVP World. Thank you very much for joining us and for sharing your insight.
Thank you very much.
And I'm Michał Matlak. You're watching TVP World. Please stay with us for more latest news and updates.